Record. Hello, my astrology friends. This is Lada from astrolada.com, and today my guest is the incredible financial astrologer Sama, who will be speaking to us about the crazy financial times happening now. Hello, Sama.
Hello, Lada. Good to be back. Good to be back on the channel talking with everyone. And yeah, crazy times, right? So a lot to talk about. We'll get into all kinds of crazy predictions. Yeah.
Yep. And that comes right on time, like we astrologers said, when Pluto shifts signs, the economy, everything starts changing, the whole world order,
Everything,
financial system.
everything, everything. Things are going to get a lot more expensive. Wives, go tell your husbands that your one of your favorite financial astrologers said it's the best time to go shopping. You've got my permission. I've got your back because in our last interview, right, the climate change wars, remember I said in Q1 in 2023 that we'll see a drop in inflation, and we did, but of course, friends, Q1 is over. So I'll explain, we'll talk about inflation, the eclipses, some war charts even. But first, I'll just start with the value. Let's open up now with the question I get the most. What is the market going to do this year in 2023? What is the stock market going to do, Sama? What is Bitcoin going to do? These are all great questions, right? And so, of course, the US stock market, like I said, the last time we met, it's going to be volatile, right? That means up and down. It's going to be shaky, so to speak, right? We've already seen banks shaken up a bit. It's April now. So from here, actually, the market is generally going to go down, then up, then down in 2023. That's the prediction. So more specifically, the eclipses are going to represent the two down points in the US stock market this year. Okay. So that's this May 2023, and then late October again this year, going into November into 2023. This
The
summer,
the first one starts on in the April 20th. Would it be
yes.
seen from earlier already, from April?
So one of the markets that what I've been looking at, the Dow Jones in particular, that one looks like it's going to be potentially affected late April, but really May is when things really seem like there's going to be a lot more issues. Okay. And then late October going into November, that's where things seem to be drastically more of an issue. So we will survive what happens in May, but the crypto market in particular is of concern to me. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but really those 2 points, again, this May and late October into November are concerning. This summer, however, especially once we get rolling into the midsummer, this is when things look really good for markets actually. So in fact, as far as Bitcoin is concerned, the Bitcoin bull market has actually already started. Okay, it's here. On my Twitter account, actually, on the day of that blood moon eclipse in November 8th, I actually put out, this is the kind of event that could be marking the bottom of financial markets, the crypto market in particular. And that actually planned out to be true for Bitcoin. And in emails I sent out on February, I sent an email saying out that Bitcoin looks like it will officially begin its bull market in March, and it has done that. So again, May is likely to be a down point, potentially even into June, right? Talked about the Dow Jones a little bit. I'll send email updates on that, but I'm pretty confident in May being the down month in general for the US stock market, and then prices getting better as the summer progresses. And of course, I'll be back to talk about updates as the months go by. But in a nutshell, those are my 2023 market predictions. Just quick bite-sized summary. And I know that's what a lot of people want to know if they're new to this, or some have fun seeing if it comes true, because the numbers don't lie. They can see that reflected in the predictions that are made. So it's not just some opinion on YouTube. So more detailed videos will come. As I said, I've gotten requests to talk about silver and Bitcoin and other cryptos and stuff like that, but that's just the general direction. And there you have it, and yes, some came for that, but just looking back, all of us have this feeling that we don't hear what we should have up front, where we don't completely focus on what's really important to everything. It's not on the other side of, let's say, what they truly want. So now with me, we'll open up now and focus on some pretty important predictions affecting all of us collectively that you might need to listen back to several times to share or discuss with those close to you. Now, I don't know how, sorry to say this, you guys, but a lot of people understand that Pluto and Aquarius signifies a time where some kind of transformation is brought to people, right? But almost it's very easy for a lot of us to go unconscious when it comes to how Pluto will bring those transformations, right? And Pluto, on a mundane perspective, is death. It really represents that, right? We're the god of the underworld in some forms of mythological viewpoints. Aquarius is humanity, right? Me and you, human beings, networks, society, technology used by humans, technologies for humans, right? Aquarius represents all of those things. So, stated a bit differently, what we're actually living through right now, guys, is there's a modern day arms race happening behind closed doors. And with what's going to happen with Uranus going into Gemini, there'll be many videos from many astrologers about that coming. There's going to be lasers and frequencies and all kinds of things we've just never seen before. I don't even know how to explain it. There's China, for example, they have hypersonics. The US is trying to develop their own. And in terms of the information piece of affecting humans, a lot of what is changing is going to include information passed through networks, through technology, right, through the internet, the Aquarius theme. And some of you may know that includes psychological operations, right? So it pays to have certain discipline with what you're viewing on certain apps, who you're subscribed to, your newsletter subscriptions, or whatever is going through your email or you're watching. It's just an important time to think about how these things are affecting you guys, if you haven't already. So the future
You
of
mean
war,
like how the social credit will be affected by that, or
no, just what they're absorbing into their
Okay.
subconscious,
All right,
you
sorry.
know, from media sources. There's not much you can do about that. you know. But when it comes to information, really what is being sought after is control of the perception of our minds, right? This is a search for data to optimize it, to understand you as a person, what you're going to do tomorrow, what you're going to think tomorrow, and how to just nudge that however those doing those operations see fit, right? So this is Aquarian forms of warfare that are shifting. Networks will be attacked, cyber attacks, neural networks, algorithms, things that are confusing people. And of course, Aquarius is an air sign and Pluto is death. So that means death by air, quite literally, which is why we're going to look at some nuclear charts actually in a little bit. And what we saw on the 23rd, the day that Pluto moved into the sign of Aquarius, the United States was dropping airstrikes on Iran on the very same day. Truthfully, this brings us to China, right? They are an Aquarian country, they have an Aquarius moon. The moon represents the people. So life for people in China will be transformed and it will be very dramatic. I'm going to talk about gold later in this talk. I hear that a lot of Chinese people in China have a lot of gold, so maybe they'll all get rich. That's hopefully the positive outcome for them, but this will be a dramatic change. I hope these are not airstrikes. I hope we don't see nuclear war, but we have to get very real about the possibility and the risks of this, and at least know that, well, the probability is not zero, and the probability is also increasing that this is what's happening. Now, with me, as much as I believe in love and light, and I'm sure you do as well, and all that beautiful stuff, I can't sit here and pretend that Pluto doesn't bring difficult experiences on a mundane level. So we'll look at that. And this happens to us naturally as human beings, see, because Pluto never makes a full revolution in our chart. It doesn't make a full cycle, right? Mars will do it in about 2 years. The moon does it very quickly. Jupiter will do it in a year. Saturn does it, 29-ish years or so. Pluto doesn't go all the way around in our chart. It doesn't make a complete cycle. So some people live their entire lives where Pluto makes a change and they never adapt, right? And that's just the nature of larger planets that are farther away from us. and their movements, okay? So it's very easy for people to put their heads in the sand like an ostrich and just never change when it comes to Pluto transits. And so, again, I hope that none of this means nuclear war, but let's just at least use the art of astrology to look and see what actual risks are, right? So we'll do that. But now, from a market's perspective, because of war, well, governments will have to create money out of nothing in order to pay the silly humans to create that war and the weapons they'll use to kill each other, right? That's what happens. So that should be positive for Mars ruled markets because markets like to suck up money printed by governments. And so, I know that's, please understand, obviously that's weapons contractors. If that's bothersome, which I understand, you can just invest in steel, metals, Mars Mars rules coffee, actually, in financial astrology. So you can buy coffee stocks if that's more morally friendly to you. The commodities will perform very well with Jupiter and Taurus. You guys heard me talk about that a lot. And even coffee will probably do well until Mars goes back into Aries, and that won't be for a while. So not financial advice, but there you go. Right. I think the next forms of money printing, other than from government budget spending for war, which is why we're not in a technical recession, although we feel it. We feel all the other signs of recession, but money's being generated for war. And so technically they don't call it that. So that's what's keeping us afloat. But I think the next form of money printing will be central bank digital currencies that really come through after the eclipses in October. And I have banking videos on the channel that talk about that as well. So again, if you haven't watched those, real short, I think a digital euro in the end of October, beginning November this year is very likely. So we've talked about the future of the euro last year, me and you, in previous videos, right? I believe we talked about it in the sense that it shows a lot of change. They have that difficult T-square. I should have had the chart, I could pull it up, but that's something that really affects the homeland of the people in the zodiac sign of Scorpio with Pluto there, which can sometimes really show excessive or even toxic control that are affecting some of the countries in that union, right? So that's important because they're going through their Saturn return and all kinds of shakeups in their chart as well, which we've talked about, we'll talk about a little bit. I also mentioned in that last interview too that the Nord Stream blow up, right? That's probably the United States. And why that's important is because, let's say, Germany starts to fall in love with that belief or really accept that, right? Whether it's through leaks of information or process of elimination, whatever it might be. If that's a country, if they wake up and say, you know what, the US is not our friends, maybe we'll be friends with Russia and China. Well, that's definitely a world war kind of scenario, right? That would be very clear to everybody, right? So allies shifting is something that we'll look at as well, right? And for that reason, by the way, it could have actually been an anti-US country that just wants to damage America's relationship with Germany and push America into war. Who knows? But that's really the point of what warfare looks like nowadays, right? It's confusing. It's harder to know who's doing what and why they're doing it. And they'll use other people to do their dirty work. Confusion is the name of the game. So we just need to be aware of that. And there's the BRICS group video on that too. Lot to talk about, but the big drama there will come when they release a whole new currency system based on gold, which is going to affect the price of gold and other commodities as well, in order to buy their oil and their natural resources instead of the world buying those natural resources for dollars, right? If that currency does get successfully created and used across the world in a real way, that would mean that all of those countries in that group would throw their US Treasury bonds, their US government, they'd throw them away. They've already started, some of them, China and Russia in particular, obviously, they've already started doing that, right? And that currency potentially replacing the dollar, that is what really risks a dollar collapse. Now, that sounds like a joke to some people now, but life is not linear, it's cyclical. And so that would also mean even crazier interest rates in the US and even crazier inflation. So just that alone is plenty enough reason for these crazy people to go to war with each other. And we're living it, right? So in terms of the dollar,
Mm.
and from a timing perspective, when I look at the chart, it looks strong until the summer of next year, which lines up with a lot of interesting dates. People even put some of these, people were telling me even too in the BRICS video that I put up that there's going to be a lot of elections in a lot of those countries,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
2024, we all know is a year that, Putin and America, those two countries will have their elections as well. So next year, next summer is going to be pretty crazy, right? And if the dollar is getting weak at that time,
Mhm.
a weaker dollar during that time also means even more inflation. So craziness, right?
Because some people are saying, is the dollar going to collapse this year? You're saying we still have time. We have
We,
time
we
when the
still have
dollar will be strong 1 year. But next year, once BRICS starts and all of the other currencies possibly shifting, and because already countries started trading with yuans rather than dollars.
to,
But it's
right?
not going to be sudden, like people ask,
Not,
is it going to be sudden,
yeah,
like tomorrow wake up and the dollar is devalued and the house costs 10 millions than 300,000 or something? It,
right. No, that only happens at the very end of all of this, right? That's all of these things have to happen gradually and in step, right? So now they're trading with the yuan, right? They're not trading with this new currency backed by gold and all this stuff. They're trading with the yuan, but they don't want to do that. Countries don't want to do that forever. They're just doing this as an intermediary step to move away from the dollar, which slowly weakens the dollar, right? Again, it's not going to happen overnight. We still need these currencies to, transact with each other. You still have to, buy bread or, whatever you need to buy, right? That's not going to end tomorrow. Okay. So with that said, let's look at some charts. We're going to dive into the history of nuclear reactions, and that just means reactions, right? Some of these are tests that are controlled in a lab and everything goes well, but in many of these cases, not so, right? And what I'm going to do is share my browser screen. I think you've enabled permission to share, but once I'm able to do that,
yes,
it's very important
it's
that everyone also understands that, you know, correlation does not mean that this is causing something per se, right? So we have to be careful of cognitive bias. But again, we're going to look at a bunch of nuclear reaction charts here, and we're going to keep a level head. And Lada, you can jump in at any point and share what jumps out at you from any of these charts. And I'm going to spend most of the time looking at the last chart we'll look at, which is a chart that's coming up. It's not something that's happened in the past. So this one is Fukushima, right? So this was a nuclear disaster here. This is in Placidus. I normally use whole sign, but just so you guys know, this is in the house system of Placidus, which is fine. It's still, we can still use it. It still makes sense. We see that the rising is actually a late degree in Leo, but that there's a Virgo first house here. We see that there is a lot of activity in the eighth house. There's activity in the seventh house of others, right? And I want to draw your attention to Uranus, which often has to do with explosive disruptive events. We see here that Uranus actually has aspects to what are called the personal planets. So the personal planets are the planets that are within the asteroid belt, right? So that's the moon, Mercury, Mars, right? The sun. These are known as the planets that are going to impact us personally. They're in the realm of light, right? They're in the sun's light, in the sun's purview. And what is considered to be the planets that are more in the dark are the trans-Neptunian planets, the ones that are further away. They're not actually visible from the Earth. Saturn is the most visible planet from the Earth, right? So that's why in traditional Vedic astrology, they didn't consider, Uranus and Neptune and all that stuff. They couldn't see it from the Earth, right? So those planets are considered to be outside of the realm of light and more potent in their effects, and the connotation with things being in the dark, right? The effects of them, especially on a mundane level, can be not as pleasant. Okay, we see that Uranus is in aspect to the personal planet of, what do we have here? We have Mercury. Okay, and Mercury is actually something that comes up in quite a bit of these charts, which is interesting. So again, we're noticing some correlations here, right? We're going to look at this chart here now. This is the nuclear test in North Korea, right? So they're just testing things. This chart has a Virgo stellium, North Node, Sun, Mercury. And what do we see? We see Uranus in aspect to that personal planet of Mercury as well in this chart. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on all of these except for the last one. So this is the first Soviet nuclear attempt. This is way back in 1949, Virgo rising, Virgo sun. And we see Uranus here is an aspect to Mercury yet again, but also an aspect to Venus. And so the personal planets, these are all within 5-degree orb or less with Uranus. And Virgo involvement now in the third chart we're seeing. Looking at the fourth chart, this was a nuclear earthquake, North Korea, Virgo sun, Virgo midheaven. We see a Scorpio rising here, but also yet again, Uranus is in aspect to Mercury and Mars in this chart. A little wide with the North Node, but personal planets are being activated by Uranus here, which is in Aries, okay? Moving on. This is an atomic test, okay? So this happened in New Mexico. This was not an actual explosion or people dying. This is them in a lab somewhere testing things, okay? Now, the Virgo involvement is not as heavy. We have Jupiter there, and we have Uranus yet again in a sextile aspect to personal planet Mercury, okay? Another nuclear chart. So World War II, this was not an actual nuclear event on the beginning of the war, but it is interesting that because this was the event that we did see those bombs released, I just figured, why not let me look at the World War II chart, Virgo stellium yet again, and Uranus involvement to Mars. And of course, Mercury yet again, okay? The first bomb, Virgo ascendant, Mercury in Virgo, and Uranus is actually not impacting Mercury directly. I'd say it's a bit wide here, you guys, but there is impact on the moon and on the sun, personal planets from Uranus, and here's this Virgo element present yet again. And of course, one bomb wasn't enough. They decided, let's try another, and we see another Virgo stellium as well. And we see involvement from Uranus within 5 degrees, aspects to personal planets, the sun and to Mars, okay? So again, correlation doesn't mean causation, but we're noticing some very clear trends with Virgo, which has everything to do with that, which is microscopic, right? Zoomed in as much as you can zoom in. Of course, atomic energy, it makes sense. There's a correlation there. And Uranus, as we know, the planet of shocks, disruptions, electric events, it seems to have an affinity for personal planets, particularly Mercury, when there are reactions taking place. Reaction doesn't always mean a bomb is being dropped, right? So again, we're going to keep a level head, but we're looking at reactions here. I see you unmuted. What did you notice?
Oh no, it's fascinating, this Virgo connection. And Uranus is uranium as well, what's used in
Yeah,
Uranus rules uranium, so that's fascinating.
right. It is fascinating. And, you know, people use different house systems. One of the things I didn't mention much is that it also seemed Uranus is very close to cusps in a lot of these charts too. Right? So now,
Explosions of any sorts. That's poof,
yeah, yeah.
cusp.
Buildings collapsing and all of those things, earthquakes, Uranus all tends to very much show up in charts being aspected. Okay. Now this is the last chart. This is what's coming up this July, 20th or 21st or so. So this chart caught my attention during some research, right? Like we said, astrologers will talk about Pluto squaring the nodes because we're going to feel this all year. So we're all going to get cozy and comfortable with this energy, right? But this chart bothers me for a lot more reasons than that. You know, this day in particular, we see that Pluto is not only squaring the nodes here at 29 degrees of Aries. The south node is not visible, but it's here at 29 degrees in Libra. So Pluto is giving energy here, Pluto is giving energy there. And not only that, Pluto is opposing the sun here at 29 degrees as well. So if you have 29 degrees of Capricorn, Aries, Cancer, or Libra, you will probably have some sort of potent experience. I'm not saying you're going to blow up. Okay, don't take it to me that. But you're probably going to have some potent experience around this date as well in mid-July. And what's interesting is the upcoming eclipse in a couple of weeks here, or like 10 days or something like that, will begin the series of eclipses at 29 degrees. So you know what, I'm actually going to take this chart down because this eclipse, it's important that we all collectively pay attention to what happens during this eclipse, because we can use that information to come back to this video and revisit this chart if you need to in July, or I might bring it up again this July. I hope we don't have to revisit this chart, to be honest, but there's a lot of exact aspects here. So I'm probably gonna end up looking at it again, whether I like it or not. So with eclipses, right, it's like they're trying to tell us a story in a different language or something. So we have to do a little, let's say, detective work and go back in time to decipher, what was going on in our lives and in the world. In this particular case, we're dealing with a solar eclipse that's pretty intense, right? It's there with the north node that's expansive. It's moving into the horizon or the light of the sun. So in Western astrology, we consider that generally to be positive because we're going to gain something, right? But eclipses can also, on a mundane level, especially with squares to Pluto, what are they going to bring exactly? That's what we're going to unpack. Back in 2014, we had a similar setup, Pluto squaring the nodes. So you can look at what happened in your life in 2014. That year, there were terror attacks, protests, a lot of civil unrest. Last time we met, we talked about civil unrest increasing. France looks like it's going crazy, and there will be more civil unrest too. So with that said, you guys, these eclipses could also trigger the beginning of countries talking about, let's say, leaving the EU, for example, right? I said we talk about them again. Then this could be over financial issues because the financial axis is still at play with these eclipses. That is Scorpio and Taurus, those two signs, okay? So let's assume that for you now, personally, well, when it comes to Pluto squaring the nodes on a personal level, things might get intense, especially if you have 29 degrees in those signs that I mentioned, right? It can be like a deep cleanse for your soul, and you might need to let go some of the baggage and face your inner demons, right? Don't be afraid to do that. Use this opportunity to tap into your strength and gain power. It's important to know that this could also mean that some emotional trauma or secrets come to light. And let's not forget, it's Pluto, money and sex might be a hot topic in your life during this time, right? We'll probably hear about those things in the news. Overall, Pluto likes to shake those things up, those themes, and bring about change. So if it feels like your life is in a crisis kind of experience, remember that it's all for the transformation of you, and you will survive it. So it's all for your greater good, right? And we may see similar effects on the world as well, right? Remember the nodal axis in Taurus and Scorpio, the nodes being what causes eclipses are what have been lining up with these crashes, these bank events, and all that type of stuff. So whether it's the crypto market or the banking industry, something is going to give. I think we're going to see both. It doesn't mean that both industries will collapse entirely, but we will see them weakened and transformed in a way where Plutonian things are happening, right? They're being transformed. There's elements of control, power, and secrecy at play. And of course, Pluto reveals those secrets and things that have been hiding in the shadows. Not always, but many times it does. And it's time to face the uncomfortable truth about cryptocurrencies and banking and money, right? And even if fixed sign energies, sorry if you have that predominant in your chart, but Pluto will shake these things up. I haven't had the time to make a video about this in particular, but for those of you who are in crypto, I have big concerns about company Coinbase. It's a big one in the US. Tether, that's a stable coin, and another one called USDC, that's another stable coin. Those three are going to be attacked by governments. They already are, they already have been, but it's going to ramp up a lot more intense. I've been posting about these things on Twitter. I'll do a more thorough video if I have the time to see what the end results will be using charts. I do have charts for two of them. USDC Circle, I'm having difficulty with that, finding that. But I'll do a video to see the end results. But ultimately, if anyone is in crypto or has an interest in that, you have to learn how to either get a digital wallet or a hard one and put all your money there and just keep it safe. That is the answer, period. Right. And that is the trend to understand throughout this entire decade, you guys, of what's happening with money. Confidence of money in public spaces is leaving. It's going into private spaces, which means your ownership, right? So that means you possess it, you have control of it. That is the theme to keep in mind with all of your finances. Okay,
Instead of
that's the
keeping it in a bank.
answer.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah, all money. Just think about it that way. Is do I have access to it, right? So if you're in crypto and you haven't moved your crypto to a wallet that you have control of, better get focused on that now and get it taken care of, especially if any of those companies I named are of concern to you, right? It's time to take a good hard look at not only that, not just net worth, but of course, self-worth too, right? Taurus is about what serves you and your values. It's about investments and stability, right? And while Scorpio, on the other side of that, it's about letting go of what no longer serves you, okay? So all of you should be really reevaluating. You have been, and you'll continue to. These eclipses will finally come to an end in October. So we're not done with this work, but continue to evaluate what's really important to you in life and maybe put some money under your mattress while you're reevaluating your values too. So
And Pluto in Aquarius squaring, it's about sovereignty,
it's
independence.
absolutely 100%. It's all about sovereignty, you know. And if if we're wrong, you just move your money back if you want to. Right? There's no harm in that. But if you don't do that, then and if those events do hit in the way that the astrology is saying it can, that could be a much larger issue, right? So let's talk about this chart here. Let me pull this back up. There we go. All right, so this is coming up this year. We talked about the aspects, right? Pluto with the sun in an exact opposition, right? The same with Pluto squaring the nodes. Not only that, we see this Virgo activation. It's not quite a stellium, but we do see personal planets here, like we did with the other charts, and Mars is here, and the moon is there. The moon represents the people. Mars is going to represent military, machinery, sharp types of things, potentially acts, but also willpower, right? And what we want to do, our drive, right? Which means with the moon and Mars, personal planets, right, being here, we do have a strong Virgo element during this time of the year. Virgo season is later in the summer as well. So that's something to keep in mind while the nodes are being squared by Pluto. And we also see that in this chart in particular, these layouts are in the 8th house here. That is going to represent reversals, things we don't really see coming. The moon represents the public, the people. So whatever happens, within these particular aspects in July, very likely will be something we don't see coming. And honestly, I hope it means that it's something the people, the public, I hope we don't see it at all in terms of if it's going to be damaging, right? And Jupiter is trining the moon here. So it has some strength. It's possible we don't see it or that we're missed, right? But Jupiter does not really like this Mars here. I know it's in trine, but Victor would call this a false trine, right? So this could be a successful detonation of something in some laboratory somewhere, I hope, right? Or it's some kind of microscopic atomic kind of study, right? And hopefully hidden away where people aren't being hurt. That's my hope. And I suppose you could interpret this to mean that this is the beginning of nuclear energy being used and refined as a means of, let's say, providing a new energy source to the people. But maybe that's just me being optimistic, right? Then there's Mars opposing Saturn right here. And
Oh, yeah,
so,
that's aggressive.
yeah, right. And that's almost as bad as the Sun opposing Pluto. So again, more civil unrest, as you guys know. That will likely be the case in July. So just be aware of that.
It's interesting that
This,
some of the, like 9/11 happened during Pluto nodes conjunction. 2020 happened Pluto nodes conjunctions. Now it's Pluto square node. So some kind of very sometimes quite unpleasant and violent things happen around those times.
yeah, Pluto can bring quite unpleasant, violent things. It's very true. And Mars and Saturn, this is restrictive, it's competitive, Mars, sometimes even abusive on a personal aspect, depending on the person's chart, where like wants and needs are being blocked by another, right? Oppositions usually involve other people, which is why this is why I wonder, if the nuclear reaction stuff is just optimistic to say that it's in a lab somewhere for energy, but it could be because of what allies or enemies are doing that countries are saying, we need to build our nuclear energy plants. I hope that's the outcome, but the
Mm-hmm.
US, for example, you know, it's all about oil and gas is bad because Russia is bad, right? That's why they want to go to war with the climate, so to speak. Right? We talked about that, but really for malefics and opposition for, and that's not including the nodes squaring these malefics. Malefics are known as planets that bring hard experiences rather than gentle ones, by the way. It's just how we talk about planets from a Vedic perspective. The gentle planets, Moon, Venus, Mercury. Either way, to me, this chart speaks of some sort of nuclear activation taking place. Okay. Hopefully, again, it's being done by experts. It harms no one, but squares or oppositions speak of external forces. So what else does this chart tell us, right? Um, you know, again, it's my opinion. We are in the middle of this war, right? That's been my consistent opinion through all the interviews. And so we just have to be prepared for what the charts are telling us. It also tells us it's heavy energy for sure. The Pluto North Node square, opposition Sun, Mars opposing Saturn. This can very much show friends becoming enemies, right? Whether that's United States politicians that are manipulating American citizens, it could affect citizens that way. It could show neighbors that are friends, right? So this can be within countries as well, where neighbors that are friends are becoming enemies, right? Or a state like California is saying, if anyone goes to Florida, we don't like you, all those kinds of things, right? We've already seen examples of that. And this can also, in some ways, speak of cyber attacks as well. What's interesting to me, just with this whole war in general, is Aquarius rules technology, right? It rules networks, right? Which, for those that don't know, that also includes things like VPNs, which people will probably come to know more about. Those are called virtual private networks and proxies, right? And so you can basically use the location of the internet in some storage factory somewhere in China while being in the US and have that be your IP address, right? And Pluto, we know, is death. So proxy wars, right? Quite literally, right? Russia versus Ukraine. I'm going to get a little political here, sorry, but it's really America and Europe versus China. Let's be real. I mean, the news will never call it that. And the governments don't care if you understand that that's what it is or not, right? Whereas it seems in other countries, from what I'm hearing, people's news networks are a little more honest or less. It really depends. Sometimes governments care, sometimes they don't, right?
Yeah.
They know what they're up to, whether we do or not. As long as our perceptions isn't interfering, they don't care if we're being lied to or if we're hearing the truth, right? So we are really in a situation that unfortunately looks like it will continue to escalate. There's not too much. All right. So Ukraine is America's VPN, you guys. It's America's proxy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Russia is like China's proxy, right? And those are really the two beasts at war,
So
right?
Russia versus China.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Ukraine is, again,
Sorry,
it's really,
USA versus China. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's really the only reason, this war is really the only reason, like I mentioned before, that the US is not in a recession because we have a war economy. That's what they're trying to do. And when Ukraine is done with Russia, the thinking is American businesses will go in and they'll get billions to rebuild a new city. And the losers will get taxed and fined for that, right? But if Ukraine gets totally destroyed, or if the US doesn't win, then I'm not, how profitable is that plan, right? But they're so convinced that they'll beat Russia, right? So we'll see. But for now, to be quite real with you all, the war is keeping the lights on in the American economy, right?
Yeah.
We we feel inflation. We see prices going up. We see people not working less. Hotels suck. Things are not the way they were 2019, right? So we feel that things aren't as great, but technically it's not a recession because of this conflict.
Wow.
And this Pluto square chart that I had up here, get it back up, why not? It does, again, it shows escalation of some sort of cyber conflict here, especially as Pluto won't be in Aquarius as much at this point with this square, right? But this is the Aquarian age. Pluto will be back here. We will see cyber conflicts continuing to escalate. And this gets into, I don't know much. I'm learning about these things are called EMPs. Apparently, it doesn't take much to let one go, and they will just kind of wipe out all of the electric grid, right? And
Really?
so internet's down, phones are down, that type of thing. Landlines would work, which America still has landlines, though nobody really uses them. But those are the types of things that could get shut down by a type of attack or charts like this, really, right?
Wow.
So that's that proxy element with technology at play. So handles and batteries, stock up on those, right? And with the people ex-military, some that I know and some research I was able to do, what I'm hearing is that if there are some kind of like nukes or detonations being used, it will probably be smaller and more tactical in nature,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
more decentralized, Aquarian in that way. And it would probably be a country no one would think about, or it's used in ways that no one would expect. So what we
Wow.
see in the movies and the propaganda is people are probably hopefully not scared anymore because of how we're addressing this thing. But if you're thinking big bomb in New York City,
Yeah.
Empire State Building, or bomb in Moscow or something, probably not, right? Probably not. It would probably be, again, a proxy, a country that is an ally maybe of one of these countries
Uh-huh.
that is attacking some enemy group or something, maybe in a smaller country with a lot more innocent people, something more remote in that way. It's not something I've looked at heavily in terms of where that could be, but it is something to, I think, if you're in a major city, I don't think these charts will impact you. But
Mhm.
again, I don't think the destruction, if anything happens this summer, I don't think it's going to impact, like Hiroshima killed hundreds of thousands. Again, I don't want anybody being killed over any of this stuff. Don't get me wrong.
Mm.
This is just the way war seems to be progressing in our modern Pluto various eras. So
Mm.
just passing that information along. Okay?
Mm.
Now, from other astrologers will say this too, nuclear issues seem to trend around aspects we're seeing in 2025 through 2027. But again, events have to escalate to get us to that point. And because it's possible that events push us in that direction can occur this summer, you and I, it just made sense for us to come on here and just do this interview, just to aware people, right? This chart, let me pull it back up. There's just so many hard aspects here. It can mean a lot of things, right? It could show environmental attacks or disasters too. These have been increasing in the US, like the Ohio incident people have heard about, right? Which again is this element of confusion. Why is it happening? It could have been an enemy of the United States. Will they admit that to us? Of course not, right? It could have been them. It could have been, who knows? This confusion and carry on, just ignore it kind of a thing. We're going to go through a lot of that, right? So again, just be prepared for that. Jupiter's moving into Taurus. That's going to be a beautiful aspect personally for many of us. On a mundane level, we have people like Bill Gates pushing for gene therapy to be put in animals and all of the food. So we might see
Mm.
that topic being addressed more if people care about a world with natural, untampered food sources in it. So that could be a thing.
As
You
long as
know,
they label it, maybe Jupiter will
they
bring
don't
the
have to
truth.
label it. So that's
For now,
probably part
no.
of it. Yeah,
For
for
now, legally, they're not. They can put gene therapy in all the animals. So the milk you eat, the eggs will be full of spike proteins and these things that attack your heart, nervous system, that basically destroy you. But it's a lot of states are applying for that it's at least said which products come from gene therapy treated animals. If this is one, hopefully Jupiter, the planet of truth and light, that's very good point, Sama. We hope, let's fight for that so people at least can know what they're eating, those ones that are conscious.
Right. So again, we see how this is playing into themes of civil unrest. I am very confident that people will speak up, and like you said, states are already doing this. Some states are even saying no central bank digital currencies in
Yes,
the
I heard
US,
that.
which is it's a little misguided, right? Because if they swallow up all the banks, and I mean, a lot of these states are getting money from the Federal Reserve anyway. So it's kind of a technicality. But again, people will protest a lot of these things. And a lot of that is happening because Pluto's in Aquarius and people are sharing information in ways they couldn't before, right? So not all of this is negative, right? And with Jupiter and Taurus, another point on that too is that really touches upon the BRICS group, right? And a lot of those countries do feel slighted towards the US, and they felt that way for a long time.
Mm.
So, in many ways, that aspect will be liberating some countries, many countries actually, right? Watch that
More
video.
agricultural countries, Taurus, possibly.
Right, right, exactly, exactly. Yeah. So another point with Jupiter and Taurus, Jupiter in financial astrology is one of the two planets, Neptune being the other one that rules inflation, right? So said we talk about that again. So it's going to affect the price of gold. I'm warning you guys now. You guys have about a month or two to stock up on Taurus ruled things before things get crazier, right? So if you're on the fence about how someone keeps talking about buying gold, figure it out in April. If you're on the fence about should I stock up food, figure it out in April. Things are not as crazy as they will be later. And just because they don't seem crazy now, life is not linear, right? That's how people that don't know astrology think. It's cyclical. When these things ramp up, they ramp up, right? So use the ability to, and don't go crazy, right? But you have a month, you have 2 months here, stock up things, right? Canned goods, things that will last, at a basic level, think 2 weeks. If a grid is down, hopefully they'll be put back up within 2 weeks, right? And then if you have your 2 weeks, then think about what can we store for 6 months. Start small, don't overwhelm yourself, but these are things to think about before inflation ramps up. Okay, so tell your husbands, wives.
Thank you so much. We're gonna go for a bit of gold and for a bit of food because it's already crazy. I mean, our bill for food every week is $1,000. It's doubled since what it was a few years ago. I don't know how people are doing it. And you're saying, but you're saying inflation will not go super high yet for the USA because of the dollar is still not, so there'll be
Yeah, it
still,
seems like, and we will feel inflation in the US, and the cost of living is really high too. So it really affects those that are very poor in the US, which is unfortunate because the very rich who are making these policies actually benefit from inflation. I can pull up articles right now before 2020 of a lot of these experts saying that there's not enough inflation, right? So you have to keep in mind when the price of everything goes up, those that own businesses, the price of what they own is going up. So of course they would think, oh, we could probably benefit from a little more inflation. They don't understand how these things affect, the poor person. They really don't. So unfortunately, they've gotten the hint because people are upset and they're protesting. And with inflation coming back, that's another reason we're going to see more social unrest too, which gets us into Aries, right? And so none of this is to scare you guys. It's just to be prepared and adapt to the changes. These changes are not permanent. They come, they go, right? We're the permanent ones, right? Of course, until we lose our bodies, but consciousness is always here, right? So none of this should scare any of you,
yeah.
right? The North Node is moving into Aries. It's a good time to consider your independence and how you protect yourself. So, ladies, pepper spray, why not? It's not that difficult to buy or to carry on your keychain, right? There's also these keychain alarms that you can pull apart and have flashing lights that draw attention to you if you need that. It's a good one to give to kids, right? Gentlemen, fathers, you guys can, listen to Joe Rogan or some do jujitsu or whatever people are doing nowadays, right? Or install some, some cameras or devices, those types of things, right? Being literal, because Aries in Vedic astrology, particularly, is considered in terms of, so zodiac signs will rule areas or landscapes, right? It's considered to be the battlefield, right?
Mm.
In a Vedic. And with the North Node of the moon moving there, it just makes sense that we will be engaged in more Aries like activities. And that's going to relate to the house that you have Aries in on a personal level. Okay. None of these things are bad to have or incorporate in and of themselves. Some of you might just be training for a marathon, right? Getting in great shape. Some of you might actually enjoy self defense or kickboxing classes. Maybe you're learning how to drive, right? Aries rules things like modeling and sports too. Some of you guys might get into that, right? It's not all doom and gloom. Don't worry. Aries is a youthful energy, childlike. So use the archetype as a tool to have more self-directed, selfish, independent fun in your life, right? It's more of that I am principle. Well, who are you, right? And enjoying more of who you are during this time. That also will include, protecting the physical body as well. Why not, right? So that's the North Node in Aries. We talked about food and Jupiter there. Hurricane Ian, I think they called it, hit Florida last September. The country goes a lot of oranges there in the US. And, because of that hurricane, the amount of oranges they expect it to drop like 50+%, right? So this goes back to what we were talking about with food, right? In the sense that this is actually going to be maybe the lowest year of orange production since the 30s, the last time Uranus was in Taurus. Surprise, surprise. So again, stock up. Just wanted to share that with you guys. And also too, what that means then, because we're talking about inflation to just wrap up this Jupiter and Taurus stuff, is for these investors, traders, business owners waiting for America to drop interest rates. I get that question a lot too. When are the rates going to drop, right? And so they can have cheap money again. With inflation coming back, like I'm predicting, I don't think it's going to happen in
Mm.
2023, right? They will have to stop raising rates. The way they raise rates so fast, it's affected the banking sector. It's breaking things in the economy. We don't even know all the things that are broken,
Mhm.
quite really. They say when the money printer stops, there's a saying in finance that when the tide comes in, you find out who's swimming naked, so to speak. You find out which companies aren't in good shape, and there's no more free money floating around, really, right? So all the things that are broken in the economy, we don't really know. But as the tide comes in, we're going to see, oh, the banks are in trouble. Who else is in trouble? We haven't even seen it yet, right? So there's more drama to come in the financial world. We'll see what companies aren't really in good shape, right? So because they've already broken a lot of things too. Again, if they drop rates down very quickly or sooner than they should, we will definitely have hyperinflation because all the people asking me will just go buy stocks and the market will just go crazy again and people will just buy, and buy. And so I know I would take out a huge mortgage if rates come back down. That's what I would do. It was a party, free money all over the place. And so we would definitely have hyperinflation if that came back. So they are really they're, I want to use curse words, they're in a bad situation, guys.
Mhm.
They will do whatever they can to keep rates high, even if they stop raising it. And again, also, these BRICS countries are dumping US debt. They're going to have to raise rates even higher, which will break even more things in the economy. So all of this is a bad spot. The only way for them to prevent this is, or and what's to say it, you know, I did hear from. So again, this is a time to transition to gold, oil, silver, all these commodities,
Commodity.
food,
Yeah.
blankets. If you don't have a lot of money, silver, food, focus there, right? That's something I see in the comments often is, hey, gold is for rich people, or Bitcoin is. You don't have to buy a whole bar of gold. You don't have to buy an entire bit. That's a lot of money, right? You don't have to buy all of any of those things. You can start small, and if you want all of a bar of something, start with silver. If that makes you feel better, right? And if you're looking at government debt still, again, stick to just 1 month duration treasuries. They are giving a larger percentage than the banks are. So I would stick to 1 month basis, because again, we're at a point where this is truly a confidence issue in governments, which is why government debt is like, I don't know if I want it, or that's why the curves are changing so much. So there's a lot there, right? Protect what you take out of the banks, whatever you're purchasing. I did hear from someone whose opinion I do respect, that the confiscation of gold and silver is a possibility.
It happened less than
It
100
happened.
years
It even happened in America. The last time it did happen, again, 1930s, Uranus in the sign. It talks very similar aspects from that time and now.
ago.
So it's just a heads up, right? Instead of putting metals or jewelry or stuff like that in a safety deposit box,
Keep it.
some of you listening might store your gold and silver somewhere closer to you. And maybe if the government comes around confiscating, maybe you forget where you put it. Sometimes people have amnesia. Sometimes, it's hard times. It's crazy, Pluto squaring nodes. People forget things. It's okay. Who knows?
Advice. But you know what's interesting? More than 70% of Americans have less than $500 in the bank. They live they
Yeah.
month to month, and it's
That's
it's
why
I,
inflation's,
I don't know what they're gonna do. I mean, for them,
yeah,
it's the whatever comes.
yeah, yeah. And so again, remember, whether you guys understand this economy or this is all too much, it's based on debt. It's fake money. It's fake money. And they print it and they don't work for it and we work for it. Just remember that, right? So if the position we're at in this whole game of people realizing this is in
Mhm.
part because of Pluto and Aquarius, is in
Mhm.
part because of conversations like this. And when people realize that they're not going to pay their debts, you have civil unrest, you have the issues we're having. And that is ultimately why, when currencies go bust, they do all the time, they don't last forever.
Yeah.
Gold is really the oldest form of money we have. That's been money since Jesus was around, right?
Oh,
So
before.
before, exactly, right?
Atlantis, probably.
Yeah. So confidence in currencies, it goes up and down. This happens all the time. And that's why I love astrology. You can zoom out. What have the silly humans been doing since they've been on this rock? And you can get a larger perspective, right? And
Mm.
so remember, this is how, because it's a messed up system, it almost has to end in a new currency. That's what they always do. That's why the central bank digital currency thing, it's a very easy prediction for me to make. They're
Yeah.
even talking about it all the time, right? And they talk about it more and more the closer they get to releasing it. So all that is to say, if you are one of these Americans, very little in your bank account, change your mindset, right? Revisit what I just said. It's not real money. Real money is, honestly, it's gold, right? It doesn't, it's annoying to use, it's bulky, it's not practical, for the same reasons we all said currencies are not going to disappear tomorrow. Still use dollars. Don't get rid of all your dollars today. You need it for rent, right? But change your mindset and start to think, hey, these are valid points here. Whether the US wins or loses, I should probably store some of my wealth from a protective standpoint in different things. And hey, maybe if I want to make some money, apparently what this financial astrologer is saying is that the metals will go up. Maybe I only have 500, but maybe I can start to grow my wealth a little bit too.
Mm.
So there's always opportunity where there's, crisis and issues and stuff like that. So,
And by the
and
way, if anyone
remember,
would like a personal reading with Sama, I'll
yeah,
put the link below. You do just one type of reading, I check now, just financial astrology.
currently, it's just an hour long session. People can ask me anything. They come to me typically for finances, and then when I have breathing room in my schedule, I'll bring back the the video reading that people were buying at a sale. I don't have anything to offer right now, but when I have time in my schedule, I'll make that available. And there is actually a report that I'll talk about in a little bit. But again, no fear, guys. This is all about taking the guidance, live your life in the direction that works best for you, right? Don't go shutting down the supermarkets because of this video. There's still some time. We talked about how the eclipses are going to affect you from a personal level, right? So this is in the final degrees of Aries. We're coming to final realizations, actually, right? Of who you no longer are. So sensing shifts in identity, right? Evolution, growth towards a new version of yourself, clearer understandings of self-identity, right? So this is more of the psychological, deeper levels rather than just, go exercise or, join kickboxing or something, right? This eclipse is calling for clear understanding of who you are. What do you hold as true? Let go of things that don't serve you. Let go of different ideas of looking at yourself that don't serve you. It's about the sense of self with Aries, okay? This is a very powerful eclipse coming up. Pluto at 0 degrees, right? Squaring the sun and moon. This is a time where you can use Pluto and Aquarius to show you the information you need to work with. And this is fast, right? Pluto and Aquarius, it's collective energy, right? It's shifting towards impatience. Things are moving fast, right? So Pluto will go back into Capricorn for a little bit this year. You guys, it'll help us slow down a little bit from that Aquarian pace, assess what we're choosing, what we're doing from that Capricorn perspective. And then Pluto will be back there next January, and everything we're experiencing this summer, it'll be full on for 20 years, right? So
So do you
these
think
questions,
when Pluto gets back to Aquarius, to Capricorn in June, maybe like the power of the dollar will come back again, the
oh
old structures will strengthen
yeah,
a little bit, the old institution will look like, okay, we got it together. Like,
right.
okay, so, and after that, boom, okay.
Yeah, this pace of things will slow down a little bit, right? So we'll see that, right? And use this eclipse to answer these questions of, well, why am I here? What is my purpose? What do I want to contribute, if anything, right? And so these are questions you guys have to answer yourself. And the hints will come from the Aquarian sides in your chart about your individual talents and gifts during these eclipses. So yeah, that's that. That's all I have. I have no offers right now. Oh, soon, by the way. I am coming out with a market report June 1st. I will come back. We'll give this audience a nice discount because, gold's going up, inflation, stocks, it all sounds good on video because really it's one of those things that you feel right up front. It just looks like, settling back into how it sounds to most people, that it's not just an up or down decision, right? You'll have a reliable list of what will make money for you. So I will include research on what companies, what stocks, what assets I'm looking at. It's not financial advice, it's just me sharing what I'm looking at and what I see performing well with both financial research and astrological research that brings me to those conclusions. I'll just share a little bit of that research in the report. And the more you look to invest, the more you can reference this list and you can reference the report. So there'll be some oil companies and gas companies that actually pay dividends on there, companies that dig up gold out of the ground, stuff like that. And next year, I want to make it a recurring thing because it is a question I get asked a lot. It'll probably be the most affordable offering I have. So I'm excited about that, to give that to you guys. And since it'll be in June when the Jupiter and the North Node are hanging out,
Conjunct in Taurus.
we'll make it half off of what the price will be next year because it's half of the year, if that feels right to you to get. So I'll come back and I'll offer that. But right now, that's all I got, guys.
Thank you so much, Sama. Your insights are incredible. People love that you're so direct, that you're not beating around the bush, that you tell it how you feel it. You're not worried of censorship. And thank you for being so honest with our viewers and for insightful astrological and financial um, sharing. And thank you everyone for joining us as well. Hope you're safe. Interesting times ahead. May God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you.